Hi everyone, it's Nico from the blog documentingsimpleliving.com, where I talk about simplifying food, self-care, and consumption in the modern world. Today I'm going to be making another sourdough discard recipe, so a no-weight sourdough recipe, and this time it is sourdough crackers with herbs and olive oil. So these crackers are a great way to use up your discard, and of course you can also use just a mature starter. So to make these crackers, first combine 2 cups of sourdough starter or sourdough discard. For my sourdough starter today, I'm just eyeballing it. I think I have just about 2 cups. I'm just gonna dump my whole starter into this. A quick tip on sourdough discard, 2 cups is a lot of discard. So one thing you can consider doing is when you're building up your starter to store the discard in the fridge in an airtight container. And then when you have enough to make a recipe like this, you can just pull out the discard and use it once you've built up enough of it. So to the 2 cups of sourdough discard, add 1 cup of rye or all-purpose flour, and then add 3 tablespoons of olive oil. And about half a cup of fresh herbs. You could also substitute this with about 2 tablespoons of dried herbs. I am using thyme, but you could also use whatever you have on hand. You could use rosemary, oregano, basil. Most green herbs would be delicious. For the dried herbs, herb de Provence would be really delicious. Dried oregano, dried basil. Again, anything green would taste very good, I'm sure. And finally add 1/2 teaspoon of salt. So once you've combined all of those ingredients, preheat your oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit or 180 degrees Celsius. And then once all of the ingredients are combined to be a dough, the next step is to roll out a piece of parchment paper and coat it with olive oil. And put the dough onto the parchment paper, and then layer on top of the dough another piece of parchment paper that you've coated with olive oil. The most important thing at this stage is to roll the dough out as thin and flat as possible. So when they go into the oven, they get that crispy texture. And sandwiching the dough between parchment paper helps to make that process easier, so you don't have dough sticking to your rolling pan. You can just roll it out and then peel off 1 layer of parchment paper. So roll it out nice and thin and flat, and then peel off the top layer of parchment paper and put the dough into your baking pan and into your hot oven. If you want to score your crackers, you can do this before they go into the oven by using a sharp knife and cutting out squares or rectangles. You could also even use cookie cutters to do different shaped crackers, or you can just put the entire sheet into the oven and simply break them apart once everything is golden brown. You can also sprinkle more herbs and sea salt on top of the dough before it goes into the oven to add a bit more saltiness to the crackers. These crackers take about 10 to 15 minutes to bake. It of course depends on how thin you roll out your dough. The thicker that it is, the more time it might take to become crispy. A few variation ideas are to add about 1 teaspoon of black pepper into the dough, so the crackers have a bit of a sharper, peppery flavor. You can add about 1/4 cup of shredded cheddar cheese into the cracker dough, or sprinkle it on top once it's rolled flat to have a more cheesy cracker. And you can of course add minced garlic, so mince up a few cloves of garlic and put it into the dough, and that way you would have a more garlicky cracker. So these crackers will last about a week on the counter in an airtight container. You can freeze the crackers to have them last longer, but I would recommend instead maybe freezing the dough. So you could make the dough and then wrap it in some plastic wrap and then put everything into an airtight container, and you could freeze it in the freezer for about 3 to 4 months that way. Just thaw it out by putting it in the fridge, and then once it's pliable, you could roll it out and continue on with the recipe. The key with these crackers is to roll them thin and flat and uniform. So I've said that a few times, but if you want the really crispy, kind of crunchy cracker, make sure to roll it very thin. If you would like to bookmark or print off this recipe, there's a link to it in the description below. And if you have a lot of discard on hand and don't know what to do with it, don't want to waste it, make sure to go to documentingsimpleliving.com, because I have a whole variety of recipes that are super simple and fast to make that use discard. Thank you so much for stopping by today, and I will speak to you in the next Documenting Simple Living video.